Welcome to another episode of Chinese Manufacturing Insights by Ardencraft Technology. I am your host, Abid Ali. Recently, a lithium battery was discarded in household waste and was crushed inside a refuse truck operated by North Warwickshire Borough Council, causing a fire that destroyed a 250,000 £250,000 vehicle. Luckily, no one was hurt, but the incident raises serious questions about product design, disposal, and responsibility. And so today we'll be looking at what manufacturers should learn from the refuse vehicle fire. And today with us is a very special guest, Mike Brown, who is the Interim Director of Operations of the Council. Mike, how are you?
Hi, fine, thank you.
Mike, could you give us a little bit more about your background and what you do for the Council?
Wow, okay, so currently as the Interim Director of Operations, my role is to ensure those frontline services are delivered effectively and efficiently. In addition to that, I sit as a director on the separate company that the Council has a share in, which is Sherborne Recycling. And from there, we take the recycling products from across the whole of Warwickshire and we process those materials to make them into reusable materials put back into industry.
Oh, that in itself is quite interesting. I'd love to talk about that, but let's talk about the incident, and I'd love to pivot to that a little bit later. Reusing and recycling for second and third life. I like that. A lot more of that should happen for sure. So,
okay, so you want to know a little bit more about the incident, I would imagine.
Yes, for the incident. I mean, it happened in your council, right?
Okay.
Can you?
It did.
What happened on the day?
It happens at least every month in our council, and I'm not joking when I say that. You will find that most local authorities will have one or two incidents every month where they have either a suspected fire or a fire. You'll find that when we tip those loads at our recycling centres, again, those fires will be identified and have to be put out either from the automated systems or by the individuals who see them. To give you an idea, there was actually over 1,200 reported incidents last year of vehicle fires and waste treatment facility fires within the UK. That's a 71% increase compared to what there was in 2022. It was huge.
That's insane, because it's only 365 days in the year, so there's roughly 30 fires a day.
Well, to give you, actually, the number of fires, I would say, are quite low when you think about there's 1.1 billion of electrical hidden lithium batteries and goods that are out there every year. It's huge.
Yeah.
So the vehicle was doing its normal collection of recycling materials, and the crew noticed that there was an issue with their hydraulics. And what we would usually do is stop the vehicle and we would eject the load onto the highways, and then we'd secure that, and then the fire brigade would come and we'd put that out. That's what would usually happen. On this occasion, they hadn't detected the fire. There was no separate detections equipment in this vehicle that we had. It was a 4-year-old vehicle, so they hadn't been fitted. And because the hydraulics went, the vehicle had to then decide what best to do. So the best thing for it to do was to get back to the depot, secure area, and then from there we would call the fire brigade and see what we do from that. Because as soon as you know the hydraulics go, it's either a leak or something has burnt through your pipe, one or the other. And it's quite common nowadays for the back of those vehicles, for when the heat generates in the back of the vehicle and you can't see the smoke, that it actually melts through the hydraulic pipe and all the hydraulics go. When the hydraulics go on the compression of the vehicle, that if you wish squashes the waste up, then you're a bit stuck, because not only can't you compress it, you can't eject it. So in this case, it was one of those where we got back to the depot. The fire brigade were contacted as the vehicle was driving back, and it met it there on site. They started to extinguish the fire from the rear, and then found that they couldn't get all of the fire that was burning. So they actually had to then cut a hole in the side of the vehicle to actually get to the material, so they could put those flames out. And it was the right thing to do. But at that point, you're counting, how much is this going to cost me? Not only in productivity and hiring another vehicle in and those things, but actually, then what's it going to cost you in the end asset? Are you buying a new asset? Are you looking at repairing? What can you do? And you can see the clock ticking up on costs at that point. Because these vehicles aren't cheap to hire in. They are £1,000 a week. And if that vehicle's off for 10 weeks, that's £10,000 just in hire cost that you've had to fork out just for a vehicle fire because someone mistakenly put a battery or an electrical product in the back of that. Or in their recycle bin that ended up in the back of that vehicle.
It must have been a tough decision, right? You can't leave it because the whole truck is going to go up in flames, and that causes more problems and more risk. And cutting into it to take down the flames is, well, you're cutting into the vehicle, which, as you said, puts it out of commission and costs a lot of money.
It's one of those decisions you make, and you've got to make the right decision. The right decision is to put out that fire and protect those individuals around you. Yeah. On this case, usually, so all the drivers, all the loaders are trained as part of their toolbox training of how to deal with a vehicle fire. Over the last 2 years, we've increased that training because it's become more and more of a regular occurrence. We're now considering how best do we educate the public in getting those batteries or small products out of that vehicle. And even though we talk about small products back to household recycling centres or to battery drop-off points in shops or supermarkets, people are still disposing of that product because it says it's recyclable into their recycle bin. So it becomes an educational issue for us to deal with. And what we try to do is educate the crews that they try to spot the items if they're there at the top of the bin, or they see them when they put them in the hopper, to stop the hopper and get those items out. If not, to educate the public where they see them and say, sorry, your bin's contaminated, we can't remove that item. But it still happens, and it happens, like I said, maybe once a month at the moment. It is increasing. There are some authorities that have lost whole vehicles. There are some authorities that have more fires than we do.
Yeah. And when we talk about products, are we talking about vapes, toys, power tools, or what type of products are we talking about?
I knew you were going to say that. So the key is that we all know what a battery is, don't we? And we can all look at how we do separate battery collections. But a lot of people don't realise the old phone, the old vapes, the earpods, the small tablet, the battery packs. All those things contain lithium batteries, including those electric toothbrushes. And when those get disposed of, then usually if they're not taken back to a proper recycling point, which are provided, the household recycling centres, some of the supermarkets have those collection points, then they usually end up in the back of that refuse truck. And if they do, then they're a risk, because once we start the compaction, all it has to do is to damage that casing, connect with some metal item that's in there, and we've got ourselves a set of sparks that set that combustible material, that paper, that cardboard, alight.
I guess it's, correct me if I'm wrong here then, it's more of a problem for recycling trucks rather than collect normal.
Yeah, most of our trucks, recycling trucks, are the ones that will catch a fire. We do have some where refuse ones, but because of the type of material and it being more denser and wetter, you don't usually get that fire activating. Once we remove food waste from that, though, we know our risk is going to increase, because once we got rid of that wetter food waste, we're now just in dry recyclable or dry non-recyclable products that are combustible, because we're actually taking them for incineration. So we see that risk increasing if we don't do something different than we do today. And at the moment, members have looked at options around that, and we're considering how best we can change our collections to actually encourage the public to separate those small wee products, those small electrical products, and collect them separately. It increases the council cost in collections and therefore the impact to the public, but it is something that stops the damage to the vehicle and reduces the risk to the individuals. So operating small wee collections as part of either the bulky collection or on recycle weeks, where we say put your small electric products on top of your bin or your batteries in this little box, and then we'll put those in a separate carrier compartment on the vehicle, and then we'll empty the recycle bin. And that's what we're proposing to do later this year, a bit like some of the other authorities are currently doing, Cherwell and some of the others that have started this off simply because of the fires they were having.
I wonder, and again I'm spitballing here, I wonder if there needs to be an extra bin that people can put out just for
another bin.
No,
we're having enough issues with Bristol. 5 bins. You want to put 6?
I know Bristol. They have a lot of bins. Already, I did the recycling there, but
in an ideal world, yes. But if you lived in a terrace property with nowhere to store your bin, you've got a bit of an issue. If you live in a flat with nowhere to separate it, again, you've got a bit of an issue. So the key for us is to try to offer those services on specific days, and we'll do that on recycling day. That says, put your small electric products on top of your bin, we'll collect them. Put your small batteries in a plastic bag on top of your bin, and we'll collect them separately. We do have collection points already around the borough, but we will look at trying to increase those now by saying, here's a dedicated collection that will hopefully, one, increase recycling, but to reduce the risk of injury and fires. Because there will be a time when we don't know about that fire, and it will impact our crews, or we'll have to eject the road, and it won't be somewhere safe to eject the road, and the whole vehicle will go up. I've seen a couple of London boroughs where they've been able to eject the road on the vehicle, and they've just had to stop the traffic and let the vehicle go. It's not a pretty sight.
No, it's not. I mean, let alone the amount of toxic gases that's actually now out in the public. There's a lot of risks, not just the staff, but members of the public and people in that area.
Yeah, and when you take the amount of lithium batteries that are out there at the moment and the increase that there's going to be behind this is just something that's going to become even more problematic if we don't find a solution quickly. That's common right across not only the UK but across Europe. We talk about a refuse vehicle collecting fire, but I've seen whole recycling facilities go up. It wasn't long ago that the one just outside Nottingham, it was north of Nottingham actually, between Nottingham and Derbyshire, and theirs set on fire and closed the facility for nearly 4 months. That waste was having to be diverted from that side of the country right across over to Coventry. So the cost of that diversion and if you took the emission impact of that diversion and the fact the plant was down, cost absolutely millions. And that's because it had got into that recycled material. It had ignited within that what we call tipping bays, where we tip all those waste from all those vehicles, and the lot had gone up. And the special systems are there to put out the fires, but sometimes they're not quick enough.
No, I bet. And it's interesting you mentioned earlier about the weed, because from a manufacturing point of view, is we have to pay a fee based on the tonnage of lithium that we put out there, right? So when there's an outage like this and a recycling plant or vehicles on fire, does the budget come from the or is it a separate budget? No,
we don't. We don't. So in the currently under the PEPR, the packaging regulations, we'll get the funding. For we don't get the funding. Was a requirement that producers paid a responsibility to, if you wish, for those types of products, and they had to put in the scheme to recover that material. Not all of those materials are being recovered. They go back to a third-party recoverer. As a collection authority, I'm not a disposal authority, therefore collecting it has no recovery cost. The disposal authority would have grants and funding towards it, hence why they provide facilities at their household waste recycling facilities or other collection points where they have contractors collect that material. Where that doesn't happen, and it's put in the refuse vehicle from a normal householder, we as a local authority, as a collection authority, get nothing for that whatsoever. So we're looking at a scheme to try to reduce the batteries and the small electric goods, simply because it's the right thing to do and it will reduce the damage of our vehicles, not because anybody's given us any funding for this.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realise that the two were separate, actually. And this is the
Completely
cool thing
separate.
about getting to talk to someone actually managing it on the ground, because as a manufacturer, obviously we're taught this. We're like, oh yeah, design for reuse, design for impact. But sometimes a lot of factories, especially in China, they'll see how it's 20 cents cheaper just to glue the battery in. So they'll just glue it in because from a reliability point of view, when you're vibrating or transporting it or even drop testing, it means the battery's firmly in place, it will last longer, and there's a whole piece around that, an argument that actually it's more sustainable because instead of breaking in 6 months or a year, it'll break in 2-3 years. So it always sounds like a great thing to do, gluing the battery in, but it will actually make it harder for the user to remove it, right?
Yeah. So many years ago, I say many years ago, we're going back 20 years ago when the WE Directive first had come out. I was working for Peterborough City Council, and we set up a separate WE facility that did nothing else but collect small electrical items or even large ones, washing machines, whatever, and then refurbish back those to go back to those people that were either couldn't afford a new one, or where we were putting them into social type housing. And that scheme worked quite well. In addition to that, they recovered some of the soldering or the gold from some of the connectors and within that equipment, and they sold that back on. That facility was funded, or partly funded, from some of the WE grants because Peterborough was a waste disposal authority. But when you get to places where you don't have those types of facilities, you've only got small collection points, which are civic community sites or household recycling centres across a borough like North Warwickshire, for instance, then they're limited and people have to have a car to take that item to that centre. And if you ain't got a car, you bought the thing and you come on a bus, you're not going to take it back to dispose of on a bus to that site. It just goes in your bin. So we need something better. We need a better approach to how we deal with small electrical products and lithium batteries, if you wish. And that whole WE regulations and how it's applied across the UK just needs that review to say, actually, how could this work better? Not only with the manufacturers, but actually with the householder. Being able to eject an item a battery or a battery pack and giving us that to dispose of separately is a better way than just hiding it in a toothbrush and not telling us it's there. So it does need future review, I'm afraid.
That's true, because sustainability is coming in piece by piece within this, and we talk a lot about the product life cycle, also the disposal. But we talk about the disposal because the idea is, well, how do you get a second or third life and use out of the product? And unfortunately, for a lot of products, the first failure point is going to be the battery. It's inherently it's a great resource from a design point of view, but it's got inherent weaknesses, i.e., susceptibility to fire. And I feel like we're only just about thinking about the disposal side, like we talk about a lot to our customers, but it's not quite hit the vast market yet, because arguably if you design it for second or third use, you would make this is like some of the old school Nokia phones, you would be able to take the battery out and replace it, and then suddenly you're obviously discarding a battery, right? It doesn't look like a phone or a toothbrush, but if you imagine all the toothbrushes had replaceable batteries, and then suddenly you're able to do that, whether that's on a customer level, or what a lot of brands are trying to figure out is, can they collect some of their old products when they do deliveries with DPD and the rest of it, so that they can actually get a lot of the parts and reuse it. So it's definitely very new within this. It's just, I feel like it's a two-way street, but I can't sit here and be like, oh, the council needs to be better, we has to be better, because you've reacted to the problem, right? It's not necessarily been your problem, because if it was and it's hard to say whether it's a knowledge-based problem either, because if the batteries were obvious, it was easy to take off and easy for someone to put away. I have to go to my local Sainsbury's to dispose of it. Right, I forget I've got a backlog of batteries just on the side that I haven't put in the bin. But literally had a conversation over the weekend where my flatmate was like, "Hey, shouldn't this go in the bin?" I'm like, "No." Literally talking about this on Monday.
Okay.
Right? Because it is hard, right? On so many different angles.
So there's two key areas that we would consider as part of the industry really important. One is what councils and the waste operators can do from its perspective, and that's about providing clear messaging to the public of the dangers and the risk of those things and where you can recycle batteries and small electrical products. We've got to make battery drop-off points more accessible because, as I said, not everybody has a car to drive to the recycling centre to do that. So how can we get those locations where the public regularly visit, such as Sainsbury's or Tesco's or whatever, to be able to then collect from them at that locations and then dispose of that? But even libraries or leisure centres or council offices, those are places we can put those battery collections, but then we need to put a collection system behind it. Train the crews and staff to spot those risk items. So the continuous training that we have for toolbox talks around that is key. But if we can stop it going in that vehicle and spotting the goods before then, even better for us. And the last and not least is improving the sorting and fire suppression equipment and systems we have at our waste type facilities, because they're not, although they're good at waste suppression, when you have a battery fire, it's a lot more volatile and quicker than a normal standard combustion fire from heat. It's a completely different ignition point. So improving those suppression systems, making sure that they can react and spot those fires and extinguish those fires quickly is important. But shops and manufacturers, what should they do in my view? Well, offer take-back schemes would be good, as you've mentioned. That would be great. Improve the labelling of those products so people know there's a battery in them, because I'm sat looking at 3 or 4 products on my desk here thinking, has that got one in? Do I guess? Do I know? How do I know that? And then last but not least, but designed for easier removal and recycling of those batteries. And I think that would be key for me. Where I'd want to see the industry, shops or manufacturers go in the future. If they could work or focus some things around those 3 things, it would significantly help.
So yeah, you're saying your number one message to manufacturers, if you're talking to them directly, is make it easy to remove the battery.
Well, that's one. The others take it back.
Wow, okay, yeah.
Have a take-back scheme.
I guess that's more of the
Reduce your costs.
But, yeah.
Improving labelling. And then last, but design it so you can remove that battery and recycle. But whatever they do, even if they offer take-back schemes, they should be designing that battery to be easily removable, because the harder they make it, if they're gluing it in or whatever, the more difficult and the more time consuming it is to recycle that product. And it might be cheaper to manufacture, but when you then start saying, is it viable to recycle, you run into a different problem then. You don't get a whole life cost of recovery. You just get one of product to consumer and tick the box. It's not the coming back bit.
And I guess as well, from a design and manufacturing point of view, there are newer cells like lithium iron phosphate that you can puncture and you can compress. And the idea is they have a really high thermal runaway so that they don't actually catch on fire. So a lot of home energy products or megawatt container storage systems are using these new type of cells. And they've got some really cool videos, which is they will literally puncture it with a power drill and there's no fire, and then they do it with lithium ion, the normal one, and they obviously set on fire immediately. So there are definitely now uptake of newer technology preventing this fire from starting in the first place, because you don't want your power bank or mouse or any product at home just to spontaneously start combusting because of its house risk. In the same way that would help recycling centres. So there is a big shift towards it. At the moment, it's a cost conversation, right? And that's why I really wanted to highlight it in this podcast is if you're deciding between 50 cents or 70 cents to get that battery that prevents fires, that actually can save millions just for a borough, right? And now apply that regionally, nationally, across Europe, across the US, as now you talk about a lot of money that you just don't hear about, right? That this small decision can actually cause such a big problem.
Totally agree. Absolutely totally agree. So if you just took the loose, 1.1 billion electrical items sold, 449 or 50, nearly 450 million loose batteries have been binned every year, and that includes some 260 million vapes, which people are supposed to take back, which they don't. And nearly half of the adults, when you speak to them, when you do those surveys on those stands that we have engaged with the public, didn't even know that some of those items contained lithium batteries, or that you weren't supposed to put them in your bin because it says recycling and therefore recycled it. Yeah, but that's not the place we want you to recycle it. Like I said, the alternative is we have to change our collections to meet how those products are being presented, and that's costly for councils. Because when we invest in a refuse vehicle, we're investing for 9 to 10 years for that asset. To then figure how do I change that into something different is, and if I want to put a new round on, it still has to go to every household separately. It has significant costs. We've just rebalanced all of our refuse rounds, so we have refuse one week, recycling the following week. And the reason we've done that is because on the recycling week we'll only tip once, whereas on a refuse week we'll go at the tip twice. That will leave us capacity to collect those items off the top of the bin and put them in separate carrier boxes in the vehicle, which will allow us then to pick up small electric products and batteries. But just to do that complete changeover, the round rebalancing, training all the staff, telling all the public in communications that this is happening, has cost us 40 to 50,000 just in that one change. And then we've got to oversee the implementation. And that's before we start telling the public, come on, give us your small electrical items, this is how we're going to collect them. So those costs of change are there, but people don't see them or notice them sometimes.
Yeah. Within this as well, I guess we haven't talked about the labeling yet either, because you're right. Is when you see a product and you're like, oh, it's you could recycle it. It feels too good to be true always, and then you're like, well, I trust the label, but you forget about the battery aspect, right? So, do you think there should be a change in labeling? I know from a manufacturing product design point of view, you need to make it obvious it's a battery, but I'm just thinking if I see a product...
Now, there's another one, isn't there? There's one that says...
It's confusing. Right?
Yeah, there's one that says, do not dispose in the household waste. Just don't do it. Just, take it here instead, or recover it at this location. Because at the moment, if you say it's recyclable or it contains a battery, that means nothing to the public. Do not dispose in your household waste bin means something to the public. It says don't put it in that bin. And I can enforce that when it's put in.
Yeah, to me that feels like don't put it in your normal black bin, but maybe it's recyclable, right? It's still confusing.
But I don't know, if we can get that label and say not disposable as household waste, but where to dispose of it may be better. Maybe that will help. Yeah, or take it back to the manufacturer.
But
yeah, it's all right, but you've got to think about the extra cost. Every time we introduce one of those large vehicles and it operates, it's around about £250,000 just for the vehicle. Operational, £110,000 a year operational costs. So when you take the whole lot, you're looking at about somewhere around about 150,000 a year just to run that vehicle with your depreciation costs in. It's just, Yeah, so they're not cheap, although North Warwickshire is relatively small, we operate 5 vehicles on a refuse collection. Operating another 5 vehicles would be significant. It's another, where do I get £500,000 from? Plus,
Yeah, that's true. Because I guess I'm simplifying it in my head. I'm not the expert in collections. So in my head, it's like the supermarket bins. Actually, here's a good question: who collects the supermarket battery bins?
They'll collect their own. And the reason why they'll do their own, just like they collect your plastic carry bags or your cardboard or your other recycled material, so they'll want to collect their packaging. The more packaging or electric goods they can collect and back to their distribution centres, because that means that vehicle's not going back empty, by the way, the one that's bought the food's going back with packaging material on, then they're able to recover the costs of that material either from selling it or alternatively reducing their charges that they're going to get from we or from the PEPR, the producer's responsibility of packaging. So the more they can recover, the more they can reduce their costs. And that's key for them.
Oh, that is interesting. I didn't realise it was a separate...
Yeah, and if not, you think that Arctic wagon brings all the food to that store, empties all those stores, but every time it empties, it has nothing to go back. So if it might as well take the packaging back, and if it takes the packaging back, that can be sold then as recycled material or offset against what charges they'll get under the packaging regs. So the large ones have a distribution network that works. It's the local shops, the small, medium businesses that don't.
Yeah, and I guess the other angle to think about is we're not just solving it for your borough or to prevent fires, is we can imagine an ideal world. An ideal world is you're going into store or buying it online. It's got plain brown box packaging, so it's easy to recycle. Your product comes out. You can use it for 3, 5, hopefully 10 years. Though that's a big stretch, but people are trying to, elongate the life of a product. And then when you dispose of it, it'll be great if you can repair it or actually get another use out of it, whether that's the battery or the components, because also from a sustainability point of view, that means you're not adding mining more raw materials or more components. And then again, in an ideal world, we can collect those products back and use it in the V2 or use it as a refurbished unit. And nowadays, you can get really good refurbished laptops, which are just as good as brand new ones. So I think part of this idea is, refurbishing and getting to this ideal world is what we need to be more sustainable, but it also de-risks, fires to begin with as well.
To some degree, I would agree with you, but can you get to that ideal world? Because you've looked at it from a balanced approach rather than a profit and loss approach. And it's a commercial word and commercial competition. And we just mentioned China and China products. The reason why we don't manufacture in the UK is because the level of salaries and incomes we pay people will not allow us to pay those manufacturing. So it's easier and cheaper to import. That's an economic world and place, isn't it? And you're then going to try to change, if you wish, some of those other countries that work on commercial profit into more of a balanced economic approach. Can that be done? I doubt it, but we can see.
Right. I think with the new EU legislations, like, for example, battery passports coming out, product passports, so you can actually see, A, a lot more information about the product, but B, the life cycle, how long it will last. I feel like we're slowly getting there. We're far away.
All right. So let me give you a bit of insight then. Then, if you let's take recycled materials, and we talk about there are some recycle facilities in the country that will only use recycling facilities in the UK because they know the material is going to be reprocessed. We've seen some of those close down, paper mills and others. But if you go to the market and if you look, you can buy paper now as a trading commodity online. That paper may be 10, 15 years old, and all it's done is sat in a container and be traded as a commodity. It never been anywhere. It's just sitting there at a dock or a port, being traded as a commodity. At some point, it ends up in one of the China or one of the other countries where you can see them again trying to recover the good bits out of it. but it's not being processed, it's not being used, it's just being traded as a commodity, because we're looking at packaging note returns to demonstrate that we've recycled and recovered. It's not really recycling and recovery. We're just buying a bit of paper to say that we bought all this paper down there, so we've offset our liability. Doesn't mean it's getting processed. It's just down there in a container, and you see that quite a lot of. So now you're starting to see local authorities say, actually, we're going to insist that we have evidence that it's recovered, or that it goes to someone in the UK or Europe, and they have to demonstrate it's been turned into a product. Because if not, then it's just commodity trade, and you just put it into a container of plastic and you're selling it today, and then tomorrow you sell it again because you get higher value for it, or you buy them next week because they're low value and you sell them again. It's like a stock and a share. And people, some of the big companies, the biffers, they have people that do nothing else but trade these commodities all day long, recycled material commodities. But they're not actually being recycled, those materials. It's just trading the bits of paper that you need as a company to demonstrate that you've recovered your oil packaging material equal to what you produced. And that's where the risks are. So to try to get it so it makes it into something, again, you have to look at how you change the way that councils or the governments work. It needs to demonstrate it's producing a product. And at the moment, we're not getting that. We're not even getting that with batteries that are recovered. Off they'll go to Portugal for recovery. Into what? Becomes my question. Because I don't know what they're recovered into. I'm not seeing the outcomes from those outputs from that. And are we really recovering that? 450 million lithium batteries? What are we recovering them to? And have they been recovered? What products are we getting from them? Are the lithium batteries we got nowadays made out of recycled ones? I doubt it.
Because batteries don't last a long time, and that's part of the problem, right?
It is. So when you look at recycling and recovering them, what are they being made into? What products are you getting from them? So it's a difficult one, and you're back into that life cycle again, and we all want to be sustainable, we all want that life cycle to work. It's difficult when you're trading across Europe and across other country boundaries. It's really difficult, one, to track it, and two, to understand that what you've actually recovered is being turned into something. You go back 3 years ago, you saw Norwich with its waste identified being disposed in a landfill in a third world country, not realising that its recycling materials had ended up there because it had gone into a trading mechanism and just been sold, and at some point became of no value, so we'll dispose of that and do the next load. So if you can do better with batteries, yes, please, that would be good. But in the meantime, bringing it back to that local bit. We know what we need to do as a council, but we'd love manufacturers and shops to improve that labelling, look at better recovery, and then hopefully we're going in the right direction of educating the public, because at the moment they don't get it. They don't know which items have got a lithium battery in and which haven't.
And we could tie it up with this. If you were designing a lithium-powered consumer product tomorrow, what would you do differently, knowing what you know now?
Other than put a big label on it. Make it glow. I don't know, actually. That's a hard one. I think what would I want to know? If I was a consumer, I just want to know that product in my hand has a lithium battery and can't be put in my normal bin. And I don't know that quite a lot of the time. I just don't know if it can or it can't.
Because it's also important, like in the user manual, a lot of people say, oh yeah, we've already included it, but nobody's reading the full user manual, right? So you're right. I like your idea about making it glow in the dark, right? Just glowy and shiny, because you would see it, right? And it would be a lot a lot more obvious, because you can't assume people to be reading manuals, and you can't assume people will read everything on a box either. And all they'll see is the recycling logo and be like, great, that's going straight in the recycling bin. We live in the future, and Mike Brown will be able to sort it out himself.
I think when you count up how many, if you just sat at your desk and you count up how many things have a lithium battery in, I'm just looking now and I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's before I get to my computers. 11, 12, 13 that I can just automatically spot here, and that's just on my desk. From my mouses to my computers to my light to just.
I wish you had all the packaging for all those products. I wonder how many of them.
We don't have the packaging. I'm looking at my Apple mouse, and that clearly didn't have the details on.
I'd be curious if you wanted to dispose of one of those items, what would you do?
Yeah, that's a very. What would you do with your normal mouse? What would you? Yeah, most people would. I bought a new one and I throw this one away. It's got a lithium battery in it because it's chargeable. But without thinking, well, without me knowing that's going in, most people wouldn't know that. And I think that's the scary bit. People not knowing where they've got a lithium battery or what that risk could be around that battery. I mean, that's the scary bit. But it is only when I put them in the back of my freighters it goes wrong, usually. Or I put them in the waste treatment facilities, they go wrong. And that's because I'm squashing them or compacting them or, putting them under serious stress they weren't designed to do. Just having it on your desk isn't an issue.
It's a good point you raised as well, is when we're designing a product, obviously there's a lot of reliability testing. We do drop testing, we do vibration. We don't necessarily look at it as what happens when it's crushed, because we assume it's going to set on fire, and it's actually quite dangerous to do even in test labs, right? There are specialist test labs that do it, because we know the answer, which is, well, it's going to set on fire, right? But what we don't think about is, well, is there a way, if there's a short circuit, is there a way of heavily discharging it or doing a deep discharge or try to... I saw one company, they use the minimum energy density cell that they can get away with, because then there's less of a fire. But that's counterintuitive to what people want. They want the best batteries, the highest density, right? It's almost like a chicken and egg situation where it's hard to make that decision. But you're right. I think awareness is really key. The labeling is really key. But also, from a manufacturing point of view, well, can you crush it or compact it and allow it to fail in a safe way?
Yeah, one of the things we just looked at was, should we fit some type of warning device as a smoke detector type thing inside the refuse freighter? That would tell me, yeah. They run on lithium batteries, would you believe? But they do. and it connects through into the carbon. It would tell you, but it doesn't deal with my problem. It just tells me there's a fire or there's smoke or something there or excessive heat's being detected. I still left with a problem with how do I empty that vehicle safely without either blocking up a complete highway and dumping it on the road or trying to get somewhere safe to eject that load. So there are things we can put in place that will help us identify it. It's just not solving my problem. They're just mitigating some of the risks that could come with it, that's all. And I'd love to get to the place where we could solve the problem and therefore not have batteries in the vehicles. That would be my ideal world, but I'm afraid we're not going to get there just yet.
Hopefully, slowly but surely.
Hopefully.
The problem's not going to go away, is it?
It definitely isn't. Well, unless you would change batteries and go up with something completely different.
Yeah, salt-based, lithium iron phosphate. We are slowly getting there for some products. It's true.
Yeah, so I've heard. Good.
Cool. Well, is there anything else you any other burning points or burning questions that you'd like
No,
to answer?
I just think we've got to build that communication campaign, as I've said, from a council and a waste operator perspective. But the support of industry around some of that, to me, is key. How do we get good labour in? How do we get them to promote and offer take back on smaller businesses or enterprises? How can we get a collective take back rather than having that little shop have to do it? Where can we get 10 shops to work together to do that? And how can we support that? How can the bigger stores help support some of those small businesses? And then last but not least, how can you design that easy removal? And if they can get to there, that would help us. It would help us recover those items if we're still collecting them separately from the resident, but it will also help manufacturers take those items back and recover them into either new reusable products or something different.
Yeah, no, that was a great summary within this. And I hope, a lot of my listeners, they're from brands and manufacturers, enjoyed actually hearing about the details, because I did not know any of the stats in terms of there's 1,200 fires in the UK, right? That this is almost something you deal with on a monthly basis. That's insane. I thought it'd be one-off, right? Because we very rarely hear the news around it. I thought this was a one-off, but it's a far bigger problem that we're just not aware of. And you're right in terms of the costs. These vehicles are really expensive. As soon as one's out of action, there's a whole cost associated with that, and that's if you're lucky and manage to get it in the first section. If it's going to a recycling centre, the problem just compounds massively. And so it sounds like councils are doing a lot to identify, mitigate it as quick as possible, because I guess major ones don't happen too often, touch wood, and same with the on recycling centres. But equally, it's not your problem to solve. But it's not your responsibility, right? Part of it is also with the consumer. Part of it's with the manufacturer, with the designer, and I guess the main argument, yes, with the economics, but in terms of we're pushing to a more sustainable world, right? And rather nicely, making a product repairable so that it has multiple uses actually also mitigates the fires because of the collection systems. And if you can't easily repair it, then it's really costly to do it, right? So a bigger driver and a bigger push towards this, I was going to say accidentally, but inevitably solves your problem as well within this. Still assuming, the customer does what they're told and they'll put it straight into the recycling, right? There's the caveat. So it really is a three-way partnership for everyone to really work together for it.
I'll see if I can.
Go on.
I'll see if I can get you some footage of the fire suppression systems as it's putting them out at the recycling centre, because you will be surprised at how often that suppression system has to target a fire and put them out in the tipping bays. Right. And we're talking like nearly every day it has to put some out. But you'll see it working, and it's really quite interesting to see how it does it, how that AI interacts and puts that fire out automatically. We're not that lucky to have that same sort of equipment on vehicles, but
that's why I'll recommend that, Mike, you just stay with the vehicles and just looking at it all the time with a fire extinguisher.
Yeah, it's not good. You can't see inside them. That's the trouble.
True. But no, this has been great. This has been really educational. I've learned a lot in it as well. I thought I was already quite literate in this area, but no, you've really opened my eyes. And as well, I look for a lot of my listeners within this. I appreciate you running through this.
Yep. You're more than welcome.
Cool. Well, that's definitely going to conclude to the end of the podcast. Good pause for Annie to stop. I will also just do an outro, but usually I revisit all the points and re-record the outro, so it's a little bit more clean. But yeah, that's the end.
I'll leave it with you then to do. I'll send you it across.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful. And any images, any videos?
I'll send you the ones, the suppression systems working from the recycling centres Sherborne one, so you can actually see how that works and operates, and the amount of fires it has to put out over a short period. But yeah, once we introduce our new service, then we'll let you know what happens with that.
That's good.
But more than happy to help.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Now, I've still got 5-10 minutes. I don't know what your schedule is. I know it's 3 or 5. If you've got any burning questions for me, here's your chance.
I've got none at all for you, to be honest with you. I haven't actually. I haven't. No, I got a 3 o'clock meeting anyway, so it's
Okay, fair enough.
5 minutes later, as it is. We're doing a catch up on the round rebalancing, see where they got to today. What happened today? Because last week was the big changes. This week it's recycling change. How many people put the bin out? What's the presentation rates? Are people doing what they should be doing? Do we need to target any more campaign education around those areas or not? So it's so we're just running those down at the moment. So it's like get them over. I'm happy because the teams has done a very good job around the campaign. It's just now making sure it's bedded in before we start thinking about food waste, which we've got to do in June. So yeah, we should be doing it at the beginning of April, but the plant that provides the bins set on fire. Surprise! Had a plastic fire. Yeah, and so our bins aren't going to live till the end of May. So we can't roll out now till June. But yeah, so that will be interesting. It's not as hard to get people to do food waste because either they put it out or they don't put it out and you visit them. Whereas doing the round rebalancing, 80% of people had a day change or a bin change. So that was a huge change for the public to get used to. But majority decided that the easiest way was to put all the bins out and just let the council pick which they want to take, which worked quite well. So I was happy with that.
Nice.
But yeah, all good.
So that was Mike Brown, Interim Director of Operations at North Warwickshire Borough Council. And what a conversation that was. We started with a single incident. A lithium battery was crushed inside a recycling trust, caused a fire and destroyed a £250,000 vehicle. But as Mike explained, this isn't a one-off. His council deals with battery fires roughly once a month, and across the UK last year there were over 1,200 reported fires in waste vehicles and recycling facilities. That's a 71 increase compared to 2022. That's not a small problem. That's a trend. What really stood out to me is how invisible the risk is. Mike counted 13 lithium battery products on his desk before he even got to his computers, wireless mice, electric toothbrushes, AirPods, and surveys show nearly half of the adults don't even know these things have lithium batteries in them. People see the recycling symbol and do what feels right. The problem is, when the battery gets compacted in the back of a truck, it only takes one spark to set all that dry paper and cardboard alight. We talked about what councils are doing, rebalancing collection rounds, training crews to spot risk items, looking at detection systems for vehicles. North Warwickshire is introducing separate curbside collection for small electricals and batteries on recycling days. Even that relatively small change costs them £40,000 to £50,000 to roll out. But Mike was clear. Councils can only do so much. His 3 asks to manufacturers were straightforward. Offer to take back products as take back schemes, improve labelling so people actually know there's a battery inside and that it shouldn't go into household waste, and design products so that the battery can be removed easily. That last one is big. Gluing a battery in might save 20 or 30 cents in production, but it makes the product nearly impossible to recycle safely and pushes the costs downstream onto councils, waste operators, and ultimately the taxpayer. We also got into some insights of the bigger questions around recycling and responsibility. How collection authorities bear the cost of fires but don't receive WE funding. how recycled materials sometimes get traded as commodities without ever being processed, and how newer battery chemistries like lithium iron phosphate could reduce the fire risk at source if manufacturers are willing to pay a bit more upfront. The bottom line is, it's not one person's problem to solve, but needs manufacturers, brands, retailers, councils and consumers all pulling in the same direction. Better design, clearer labelling, accessible collection points and genuine accountability across the whole product lifecycle. If you're a brand or a manufacturer listening to this, I'd encourage you to think about what happens to your product after it leaves the customer's hands. Because right now, too often, it ends up in the back of a truck and that truck ends up on fire. As always, if you've got questions, thoughts, or you want to continue the conversation, reach out to us at Ardencraft Technology. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you on the next one. This has been your host, Abid Ali. Thank you, and goodbye.